I want to put a content warning on this episode at the top, because this episode includes graphic depictions of sexual assault. Listener discretion is advised. A man of God, a faith healer, and a miracle worker. This is how Dan Johnson portrayed himself to the public and to his congregation. Johnson was a church leader, a Kentucky colonel, a proud Trump supporter, a card-carrying member of the NRA, and an avowed Tea Party Republican. Johnson led the Heart of Fire Church in Fern Creek, south of the Highlands on Bardstown Road. Heart of Fire led many wild and rambunctious parties, none of which portrayed contemporary Christian values. Drinking, drugs, sexual deviancy, all things the typical church would disapprove of, Johnson and the Heart of Fire Church embraced without yield. On December 13, 2017, amidst accusations of the rape and assault of a minor, Dan Johnson put a gun to his head, pulled the trigger, and fell not only into the Salt River bottoms, but to the bottom of Louisville's collective consciousness once and for all, leaving behind a final, rambling, nonsensical Facebook post.
Louisville is a city known for many things: world-class bourbon, historic horse racing, one-of-a-kind restaurants. But underneath the veneer of Southern hospitality lies many dark and twisted stories. From the darkest depths of the Ohio to the highest peaks of the Knobs. From New Albany to Newburgh, from Portland to the Highlands, J-Town, Smoketown, Butchertown, and everywhere else under the shadows of the Twin Spires, these are Louisville True Crimes.
The Pope, as Dan Johnson liked to be called, was born in Bastrop, Louisiana on October 18, 1960. One of his first professional positions in the ministry was with Living Waters Church in Pasadena, California. To hear him tell it, he lived an adventurous, fulfilled life in service to the Lord on high. His time at Living Waters led him to Venezuela, where he claimed to have miraculously healed a deaf woman after plunging his fingers into her ears. On the same trip, now in Colombia, Johnson claimed he had brought a woman back from death itself by forcefully commanding death to leave the body of the woman in the name of the Holy Spirit. Johnson claimed he had set up safe zones during the 1992 riots in Los Angeles. There is no record in any capacity of any kind of safe zones ever being present during the riots. He claimed he set up a makeshift morgue at the site of the attacks on the World Trade Center, offering medical assistance and last rites to all victims of the heinous attack on the United States, yet there is no record of a presence or of a morgue. Johnson claimed he was a chaplain to the White House under multiple presidents. No such title exists currently, nor has it ever. In Johnson's eventual political run, he claimed to have been endorsed by far-right favorite and aggressively mediocre rock star Ted Nugent. When contacted for information, however, Nugent and his management both collectively and confusedly shrugged their shoulders, making it clear in no uncertain terms that they had no idea who Johnson was, and certainly never endorsed his political campaign. A pattern of grandiose insanity followed Johnson all the way to the end of his life, starting in 1985. On Johnson's 25th birthday, just opposite Utica Pike on the Ohio River, orange licks of fire painted the ominous Cox Park on River Road. As police approached the flames, two figures bolted from a vehicle set ablaze behind them. Both men were easily captured and admitted to police that Johnson had paid them both $200 to set his car ablaze in what would soon come out as Johnson's first of many failed attempts at insurance fraud. Police pressed Johnson, and eventually he admitted to the scheme, telling police he paid the two and gave them a set of spare keys so they could steal the car and perform the deed. Johnson was arrested and taken into custody, where he was charged with complicity to commit arson and filing a false police report. Johnson was eventually sentenced and completed a 6-month pre-trial diversion program, which saw his charges dismissed in February of 1987. Similarly, in 2000, Johnson's beloved Heart of Fire Church found itself set ablaze with more suspicious circumstances. Official reports claim it was caused by a flammable liquid, but Johnson claimed his church had been a victim of attack by the Ku Klux Klan, after several attempts by the hate group to threaten Johnson on more than one occasion. His insurance provider, Brotherhood Mutual, saw it differently, and Johnson once again found himself in a courtroom. Brotherhood claimed to the court that leading up to the day of the fire at the church, Johnson had bounced several large checks and also had large sums of credit card debt as well. Brotherhood eventually decided to settle out of court, leaving Johnson once again to face minimal consequences for his alleged actions. Johnson would continue to lead the church in raucous frat house fashion, calling himself the Pope some days and the Bishop on the others. This would last a few short years until his actions finally began to start having real consequences from which he could only escape with one desperate move. Word had gotten around that Heart of Fire was the place to party for all those considered unwanted or unloved, whether it be by society or by themselves. The main party house on the property, the Pope's house, was also the fellowship hall where the congregation would gather for parties, worship, and anything else Johnson felt appropriate. Beer served from clawfoot tubs, hard drugs passed around freely among the congregation, people having sex in the open, and women walking topless through the sanctuary with as careless an attitude as if they were buying groceries. Johnson sold drinks from the church, purportedly as a fundraiser. It should come as no surprise that Johnson, ever the legal pariah, did not have a license to sell alcohol. This caught the attention of the local branch of the ABC, or the Alcoholic Beverage Control. The ABC controls alcoholic beverage licenses in businesses and polices anyone found to be selling alcohol without a license, among other things related to the sale of alcohol and tobacco. They then began putting together a plan to confront Johnson about his sales and make another attempt to catch him in the lurch. As agents stormed the church, Johnson and his followers were frantically rushing around trying to dispose of the beer they weren't supposed to be selling. Knowing it would lead him right back to the courtroom if he was found to be selling alcohol without a license, he threw a Hail Mary pass in an attempt to sidestep the authorities. Scrambling to remove it from the bar, Johnson told his congregation to lie to police and say they brought it from home. Months later, Johnson was once again facing a judge over the incident with the ABC. In court, Johnson wore a priest's collar in an attempt to elicit sympathy from the judge in his case. Unfortunately for Johnson, it did not work. When asked by the judge about the presence of the beer, he tried to weasel out of trouble again by proclaiming it was communion for his church. The judge saw through this ruse immediately, found him guilty on all charges, and fined Johnson $250 for selling alcohol without a license. As the legend of the Pope grew, so also did the notoriety. Local media started watching his moves. As he became increasingly aware of his presence among the public, his actions became more and more outrageous to match. Vocally opposed to President Obama during both of his terms, Johnson would share racist posts to Facebook depicting the Obama family as monkeys, idolizing former President Reagan, among many other hideous things. A proud supporter of then-presidential nominee Donald Trump, his leadership brought him more and more followers who were willing to follow his lead, whether or not it was in line with the faith he claimed to be a part of. Your content warning begins now. Among other things Johnson stood accused of, one was coercing the younger women in his congregation to make out with him. Sarah, Dan's daughter, had her friend Miranda over for a New Year's Eve sleepover. They were both underage, but Miranda had been a regular at the church for nearly a decade at this point. Johnson came home from his revelry, intoxicated once again, and went into the apartment under the fellowship hall. Miranda was asleep on the couch in the main room. Johnson knelt down next to her and woke her up. In her waking fog, Johnson moved closer to her, his breath strong enough to peel paint off the already unsightly walls. He forced himself onto her, running his hand up under her bra. He groped her and moved in close, shoving his tongue into her mouth, despite her constant cries and begging for him to stop. He got one hand between her legs, violated her digitally, and finally decided he had had enough. Johnson left Miranda without a word and went to bed. By the next morning, before anyone else was awake, she had left to go home before she would have to confront Johnson once again.
Why do you feel it's so important as a Christian to be armed?
Well, Jesus thought it was important. And in the book of Luke, he told his disciples, he said, bring a coat. You have a coat, bring a coat. You have a bag, bring a bag. So the luggage, if you don't have a sword, he said, sell your coat, buy a sword. Yeah. So I believe, Jesus taught us to be armed, and it is important.
Dan Johnson believed a lot of crazy things. about himself, about the teachings of Jesus, about how a person should conduct themselves. That clip you just heard was from an interview with the website guns.com, wherein Johnson declares that being armed is not only smart to defend against a tyrannical government, a situation with a highly questionable viability, but also part of the teachings of Jesus himself. Once again, not even a kernel of truth could be found among anything Dan Johnson let slide out of his mouth. Amidst Johnson's myriad of poor decisions was the choice to reach out to his previous victim just a week after the attack, asking her why she was upset with him, claiming he had been drugged at a popular bar the night of the assault. Johnson made wild claims, attempting to weasel his way out of personal responsibility, as he was regularly known to do. He claimed Miranda was one of his favorites. He signed off his Facebook message by calling himself her future husband, and made several more dubious claims before pressing the send button. Miranda took a day to process everything Johnson had told her, and once she had her druthers about her, wrote back to Johnson laying out exactly what she thought about the situation, how disappointed she was in Johnson, and claiming she never wanted anything to do with him, his church, or his children ever again. Miranda eventually told her parents, at which time her father went to the police and demanded to file a report. An investigation was opened, and her father was set up by the police to call Johnson on the phone and confront him about the assault on his daughter. Johnson viciously denied any wrongdoing, once again claiming he had been drugged at a bar. The case was investigated, but ultimately no charges were ever pursued. Ralph Dunlop, a journalist from Louisville Public Media, ended a tense exchange with LMPD spokeswoman Alicia Smiley via email, with nothing in hand despite multiple attempts to obtain any and all records LMPD had in relation to Johnson's sexual assault case. No records were ever produced or acknowledged. Over the next few years, Johnson would ingratiate himself with the far right more and more, owing his success to the rise of former President Trump and his radicalization of the unwell among us. He ran for Kentucky State House of Representatives, 49th District, including parts of Bullitt County, narrowly pulling out a win against his opponent, Linda Belcher. His position, however, would be short-lived. Holding the office for just over a year, Johnson began to feel the pressure of being scrutinized in the public eye. Leading into the winter of 2017, Johnson became rapidly unhinged with each passing day. He recorded a video leading his congregation in a gun and leather-clad rendition of Amazing Grace, another piece for the previously mentioned website guns.com. The Kentucky Center for Investigative Reporting released an expose on Johnson and his history. It did not paint him in a favorable light, if it were even possible to do so. Those close to him believed this was the final straw for Johnson, and what led him to make his fatal decision. He made one final rambling Facebook post going on tangents about God, his love for his wife, his wishes for his congregation, and more. After posting this makeshift manifesto, Johnson made his way onto the bridge that crosses the Salt River bottoms, put a gun to his head, and pulled the trigger, thus ending the life of a so-called prophet and accused rapist and pedophile. Here is the text of the final Facebook post to give you some idea of where Johnson was mentally at the time before his death. These are his words, verbatim, without any corrections. The accusations from NPR are false. God and only God knows the truth. Nothing is the way they make it out to be. America will not survive this type of judge and jury fake news. Conservatives take a stand. I love God and I love my wife, who is the best wife in the world, my love forever. My mom and dad, my family, and all 5 of my kids and 9 grandchildren, 2 in tummies, and many more to come. Each of you are a total gift from God. Stay strong. Rebecca needs you. 9/11/2001 NYC/WTC PTSD 24/7 16 years is a sickness that will take my life. I cannot handle it any longer. It has won this life, but heaven is my home. Please listen closely. Only 3 things I ask of you to do. If you love me as one, blame no person. Satan is the accuser, so blame the devil himself. 2, forgive and love everyone, especially yourself. 3, most importantly, love God. P.S. I love my friends. You are family. God loves all people no matter what. Heart of Fire Church sits empty and disheveled today, a monument to the hubris of man. A monument to the grandiose claims of a man so full of himself he let it guide an unimaginable number of incredibly poor decisions. The property where the church sits and the contents of the building were seized by the federal government in an attempt to finalize and pay out a portion of Johnson's debt. Johnson's wife ran against previous incumbent Linda Belcher, attempting to retain his seat in the House. Belcher won and took her place in the House, which Johnson had won just a year earlier. This episode was researched by Jamie Duval Lentz. Our copy editor is Steph Parks. Our sound engineer is Tim Miller with Apparatus Sound. I would like to thank all our supporters who have waited so patiently for new episodes. Things are moving again, and our release schedule going forward should be much tighter and consistent. Thank you all for your patience, love, and understanding. The Louisville True Crimes Podcast is a production of Goatman Media, a new and growing digital media agency right here in Louisville, Kentucky. Find them at www.goatmanmedia.com.